Zara balanced her camera on her shoulder as flashes of gold, crystal, and power collided inside the Imperial Crest Hotel. This was not just a wedding, it was a declaration of wealth loud enough to shake Lagos itself. From her cramped apartment in a Gigano, she usually edited these kinds of events with detached amusement, scrolling past silk, lace, and surnames that owned half the city. But standing here now, surrounded by perfume that smelled like money and ambition, felt suffocating. Women moved, like living monuments in towering jealous. Men floated in agbadas stiff with pride. Zara's charcoal satin jumpsuit clung lightly to her skin, practical and unpretentious. With her camera harness tight against her chest, she felt less like a guest and more like a silent observer in enemy territory. She lifted her lens toward the high table and found Kunle Adeyemi without trying. Everyone always did. Lagos' favorite hair, tech magnate, future senator depending on who you asked. His skin glowed under the chandeliers, deep and smooth, his beard perfectly groomed. Yet something was off. Through the zoom, Zara caught it, his eyes, tired, heavy, the look of a man living someone else's dream. His fingers hovered near the platinum, Audemars Piguet on his wrist, twisting it slightly, like a countdown he couldn't stop. He smiled when required, nodded when addressed, but his body leaned away from the celebration. Zara snapped the shot and frowned. Wealth had never looked so much like a cage. The music swelled, Afrobeat bass vibrating through the marble floor as Naira notes sprayed into the air like confetti. Guests screamed with joy, phones held high, chasing relevance. Zara shifted position, careful to remain invisible. That's how she survived, by blending into the background. Until the temperature around her changed. She smelled out in authority before she felt the presence. Chief Mrs. Adeyemi stood beside her, unannounced, undeniable. The matriarch's champagne gold lace shimmered with embedded crystals, her gila a towering crown of power. She didn't greet Zara. Didn't smile. She leaned in, coral beads brushing Zara's arm, and whispered with surgical calm, I need you to save my son tonight." Zara's fingers tightened around her camera. Before she could respond, the woman's grip closed around her wrist firm, controlled. "In 5 minutes," the matriarch continued, eyes fixed ahead, "Chief Law will announce a union that will chain my son's company and his life. I won't allow it." Zara swallowed. She tried to speak, but the words jammed in her throat. The woman finally turned, her sharp gaze locking onto Zara's. "Pretend to be Kunle's fiancé. Just tonight. Do this, and you will never chase a job again." The offer hit harder than fear. Around them, laughter roared. On stage, a man adjusted a microphone. Time cracked open. Chief Lawal rose, his white babanriga immaculate, his presence silencing the room without effort. He leaned on his gold-tipped cane, smiling the smile of a man who already owned the future. Zara saw the girl beside him, Aisha Lawal, perfect, polished, lavender lace hugging a destiny chosen long before consent. The matriarch's hand slipped into a velvet pouch and emerged with diamonds that caught the light like frozen lightning. Before Zara could breathe, the necklace was clasped around her neck, heavy and cold. "Walk," the matriarch whispered, steel wrapped in velvet. "Like you belong." The crowd parted instinctively as they moved forward. Kunle looked up and froze. His confusion sharpened into fury in seconds. He stood abruptly, chair scraping back, eyes blazing. "Mother," he muttered, low and dangerous. "What is this?" She smiled, for the cameras radiant. "Chief Lawal," she announced smoothly, "forgive the interruption. I simply couldn't allow the evening to pass without my son's fiancée greeting our guests." The silence that followed was violent. Lawal's smile cracked as his gaze slid over Zara, assessing, calculating. His eyes lingered on the diamonds, on her calm, on her refusal to shrink. "Fiancée?" he repeated slowly. Kunle recovered fast. Years of boardrooms had trained him well. "We value privacy," he said evenly, placing a hand at Zara's back. "But my mother has never been good at secrets." He looked down at Zara, and for a heartbeat, the mask slipped. Fear. Real, raw fear. Zara inhaled, straightened, and smiled at Lawal. "It's an honor to finally meet you, sir. Cooley speaks highly of your strategy." Her voice didn't shake. Her knees did. The aunties descended instantly, questions sharp as blades. "Where are you from? Who is your father? Why haven't we seen you before?" Kunle answered most, pulling her closer, grounding her in the lie. They escaped behind a wall of orchids as money spraying began, drums pounding like a heartbeat. Kunle spun on her, rage barely contained. "Do you know what you've done?" he hissed. "That man destroys people. You're wearing my grandmother's diamonds like a costume." Zara met his stare without blinking. "Your mother asked me to protect your happiness," she said quietly. "If you want that marriage, walk back out there, but don't pretend you're not suffocating." Something shifted. His shoulders dropped slightly. He looked at her, really looked. Not a hustler, not a prop. A woman standing in fire without flinching. The celebration reached its peak. Drums roaring, voices rising, wealth reigning. Cameras flashed, rumors ignited. Zara stood beside Kunli as equals, the line between performance and truth blurring with every second. Somewhere between survival and courage, something dangerous was being born. She wasn't documenting the elite anymore. She was inside their storm, and as Kunla's fingers tightened around hers not for show, but grounding, Zara realized this night would change everything. Not just contracts, not just names, but lives. The kind of change no camera could ever fully capture. The May's voice sliced through the pounding Afrobeat like a blade. He grabbed the microphone with the confidence of a man who knew the entire mainland could hear him without speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed. "Tonight, we have an announcement sweeter than jollof on Christmas morning. Lagos royalty has found a queen." The crowd roared instantly. Amara felt Tunde's grip tighten around her waist, firm and final. It wasn't romantic, it was a warning. There was no turning back now. He guided her out of the alcove and into the blazing center of the ballroom, where chandeliers rained light and attention. Guests shifted and gasped as they moved, Jalise swaying, Adbatas fluttering, bodies leaning in for a closer look, phones lifted like weapons. Whispers raced ahead of them. Who was she? Where did she come from? How had she appeared out of nowhere and captured Nigeria's most guarded heir? The mech laughed into the mic, feeding the frenzy. "Chief Fashade, please come and tell us what miracle God has done tonight." The matriarch stepped forward with slow, deliberate grace. Her champagne gold lace caught every flicker of light, her jewel standing tall like a crown forged from influence itself. When she smiled, it was warm enough to fool even professional skeptics. "God is faithful," she said smoothly. "Tonight is not just about a wedding, it is about a beginning." She reached for Amara's hand and lifted it. "This is Amara, the woman who finally made my son stay." The room exploded. Screams, cheers, phones flashing, money spraying like a storm with no mercy. Naira notes slapped against Amara's cheeks. Dollars clung to her emerald silk jumpsuit. Euros fluttered at her feet. It felt like standing in the middle of a controlled explosion of wealth. Tunde pulled her closer, his chin hovering near her stitch braids as tradition demanded they dance. The shuffle was clumsy, forced by the crush of bodies. But the cameras loved it. Through the chaos, Amara's eyes found Zainab Danjuma. She stood near the buffet, unmoving. Her lavender lace looked muted under the riot of color and sound. She wasn't smiling, she wasn't dancing. Her micro-mini bag was clenched so tightly Amara wondered if the handle would snap. Zainab's face held no heartbreak, only fury. This wasn't romance lost. This was power stolen. Zainab's gaze dropped to the diamonds resting against Amara's chest. Something flickered in her eyes, recognition. Realization. Zainab knew those jewels. She had grown up counting them. She leaned toward her father and whispered. Chief Danjuma's expression shifted instantly from calculation to violence. His gold-tipped walking stick tapped once, then again. His stare locked onto Amara with murderous intent. "Keep smiling," Tunde murmured, lips brushing her ear. His voice was calm, but his body was rigid. "I can hold a pose," Amara whispered back. "I'm an artist." Her heart pounded so hard she felt it vibrating through the diamonds. A man pushed forward carrying champagne, one of the Danjuma cousins. A boardroom ghost Amara vaguely recognized. His eyes dropped instantly to the camera harness peeking beneath her jumpsuit. He smiled thinly. "Congratulations, Tunde," he said loudly. "But remind me, where did your fiancée study? London? New York? Or is she more familiar with sur le streets?" The air shifted. Aunties paused mid-spray. Phones hovered. The trap snapped shut. Amara felt the weight of every eye. One wrong word and the blogs would feast for months. She took a slow sip of champagne, grounding herself. This wasn't a job anymore. This was a performance with Billion-Naira consequences. The music kept playing, but the room felt poisoned. Then Amara felt her phone vibrating in the hidden pocket of her jumpsuit. Again and again. A ripple of gasps spread across the ballroom, sharp and ugly. This wasn't celebration. This was scandal-breaking live. "Tunde," Amara whispered, pulling out her phone. Notifications flooded her screen. The Lagos Gossip Hub headline burned in neon. Chairman's shame. Truth about Tunde Adel's Suru bride exposed. Beneath it was a crystal-clear photo of Amara earlier that night, crouched near a floral arrangement, cameras strapped to her chest. The caption was brutal. "Meet Amara Okoro, freelance photographer hired for tonight's wedding. Is this the woman Adel Global is trusting its future with, or is this elite theater?" Amara felt cold. The imposter feeling finally had a name, and it was trending. She looked up. The Danjuma cousin smirked, phone raised like a trophy. Chief Danjuma stood by the bar, tapping his stick with satisfied rhythm. Zainab typed furiously, her lips curling into a slow, cruel smile. The boardroom war had spilled into public bloodshed. "We leave now," Tunde said. His voice was no longer polished. It was cracked glass. He didn't let go of her hand. This isn't your fault, he added quietly. It's mine and theirs. Security moved fast. They were rushed through the service kitchen, past stunned caterers and clattering dishes. Perfume vanished, replaced by soap and panic. Outside, Lagos pressed in humid, loud, dangerous. Paparazzi clustered at the main entrance like vultures. A black SUV slid to the curb. Safe house in Lekki is ready, the security lead said. Inside the car, Tunde shut off his ringing phone and threw it aside. In the dim light, he studied Amara not as a prop, but as a person. They think they've won because they know where you're from, he said softly. They don't know what you can do. Amara tightened her grip on her camera bag. She still had the photos, and in them truth, faces, betrayal. The hustle wasn't over. But this time she wasn't alone. The speedboat tore through the inky darkness of the Lagos lagoon, its twin engines roaring loud enough to silence the chaos still vibrating inside Amara's chest. The water split cleanly beneath them, black and restless, reflecting nothing but fragments of moonlight. Behind them, the glittering lights of Echo Hotel blurred into insignificance, shrinking into the distance like a bad dream losing its grip. But the scandal they left behind was very much alive. Across Nigeria, phones were buzzing, timelines exploding, and hashtags multiplying by the second. Amara sat stiffly at the back of the boat, her fingers locked around her camera bag as though it were the only solid thing left in her world. Her hands trembled despite the cool night breeze cutting against her mahogany skin. The sharp air felt like freedom compared to the suffocating heat of the ballroom, yet her body hadn't caught up to the escape. Every vibration of her phone felt like another accusation, another finger pointing. Across from her, Tunde looked like a man stripped of armor. His midnight navy agbada lay abandoned on the seat beside him, forgotten. He sat in a simple white undershirt, shoulders slumped, beard gang shadow darker than usual under the moonlight. Without the layers of wealth and ceremony, he didn't look like a billionaire CEO. He looked like someone who had just watched his life fracture in public. Neither of them spoke as the speedboat sliced forward. The silence between them was heavy, but not awkward. It was the quiet that comes after impact. When the adrenaline fades and reality starts asking questions, no one is ready to answer. By the time they reached the private jetty in Aleko, the soundscape had shifted entirely. The Atlantic Ocean roared steadily nearby, replacing Afrobeat chaos with something older, deeper, and indifferent to human drama. The safe house rose from the sand like a minimalist dream glass walls, white concrete, clean lines softened by warm yellow lighting. It was the kind of place Amara usually photographed for clients she never met, luxury she documented but never touched. Inside, the house smelled faintly of sea salt and polished wood. The private beach beyond the glass looked unreal, like a painting commissioned for someone else's life. "You should change," Tunde said quietly, breaking the silence. His voice carried none of the authority that once commanded boardrooms, just exhaustion. Amara nodded and disappeared into one of the guest rooms. She peeled herself out of the emerald silk jumpsuit, fabric sliding away like a roll she had outgrown. The diamond necklace followed, heavy and cold in her palm. For the first time all night, her neck felt like her own. She changed into an oversized t-shirt and cotton shorts, grounding herself in simplicity. When she returned, she found Tunde in a wide room that looked nothing like a billionaire's lounge. It felt more like an artist's sanctuary. One entire wall was glass, revealing moonlit waves crashing endlessly. Long wooden tables were scattered with old film cameras, rolls of negatives, and carefully stacked black and white prints. Amara's photographer instincts ignited instantly. She walked closer, picking up a print before she could stop herself. It was Lagos, real Lagos, a market woman laughing mid-argument, a bus conductor leaning out of a danfo, shouting destinations, a boy selling plantain chips between stalled cars, eyes sharp and hopeful. "You took these?" she asked softly. Tunde turned, almost embarrassed. "My father calls it a waste of time," he admitted. "A CEO shouldn't chase fringe hobbies." His mouth twitched. "I was supposed to be numbers, strategy, power." The morning sun rose quietly over the Atlantic, painting the sky in pale gold. Amara didn't notice at first. While Tunde stood on the balcony making tense, hushed calls to lawyers and advisors, she sat at the long wooden table, laptop open, cameras connected. Her world narrowed to pixels and shadows. In her hands, the camera wasn't art, it was truth. A witness that didn't blink, didn't lie, didn't care about surnames. Tunde stepped back inside, shirt wrinkled, eyes hollow. "The board meets in 6 hours," he said. "The leak already tanked the stock. Danjuma is pushing for a vote of no confidence." "Wait," Amara murmured, fingers moving fast. "Just wait." She zoomed into a photo taken near the bar, long before the engagement chaos. At first glance, it looked ordinary, a senator laughing, champagne raised. But Amara wasn't looking at him. She was studying the shadows. With a few precise adjustments, the blur sharpened. Faces emerged. Chief Danjuma, and beside him, the disgruntled cousin, both leaning toward a glowing phone screen. This was taken 30 minutes before the leak, Amara said, adrenaline flooding her voice. Tunde leaned closer, breath catching. He didn't discover you, he whispered. He bought the information. Another image appeared. Danjuma tapping his gold-topped stick, the cousin pointing toward the bridal suite. Coordination, intent, strategy. He thought I was invisible, Amara said quietly. But I document people for a living, especially when they think no one is watching. Tunde looked at her differently now, not as a liability, not as a fake fiancé, as an equal. We have proof, he said, but we have to go back. Abuja felt sterile compared to Lagos. Wide roads, high walls, quiet power. Amara changed her appearance completely: black polo, trousers, cap, thick glasses, the uniform of invisibility. They won't see me, she said calmly. People like them never look at the help. Inside the villa, Wealth hummed quietly. Amara slipped through with a tray, camera hidden. Zainab stood nearby, flawless and distracted. The shutter clicked softly. Once, twice. Enough. 10 minutes later, Amara was back in the SUV. The evidence glowed on the screen between them. The Adila Global boardroom felt like ice. Tunde sat at the head of the table, jaw tight. Danjuma lounged across from him, already victorious. A company cannot be led by deception, Danjuma declared. The vote loomed. The doors burst open. Amara walked in, not hidden, not small. Emerald silk, camera harness, stitch braids gleaming. You're right, she said clearly. You can't trust someone who plays games with reputation. The screen behind Tunde lit up. Gasps, murmurs, fear. Danjuma froze. The board shifted. I believe the vote is unnecessary, Tunde said calmly. Legal will handle this. Danjuma left without a word. Later, on the balcony overlooking Lagos, Tunde smiled for the first time. The gig's over, he said gently. The board shifted. I believe the vote is unnecessary, Tunde said calmly. Legal will handle this. Danjuma left without a word. Later, on the balcony overlooking Lagos, Tunde smiled for the first time. The gig's over, he said gently. Amara laughed. So I'm fired? He took her hand. No, I'm finally choosing my own life. The ring wasn't loud. It was real. Yes, she said. Below them, Lagos breathed alive, chaotic, honest. The fake engagement was over. The truth had won, and this time, the watcher stepped into the story.